Trevor Stevens is here, and oh boy, we had talked about doing IoT in the past, and I think it was kind of a long time coming, but one of my favorite things about sitting down talking to Trevor is that he has an SE background, and now he's one of our instructors within Ruckus, so he has a different kind of viewpoint into things, and that really translates well into what he's presenting, what he's teaching, and he really has a lot of passion. He cares, he's very knowledgeable. This is a blast, so help me out, join me in welcoming Trevor, and as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Trevor, you're back. It's great to have you back. Good to see you.
Hey, Matt. It's been a while. Really, really good to be back, mate.
Yeah, happy to have you. So we kind of chatted yesterday a little bit, and we decided we were going to talk about IoT, which you brought up a great point because we haven't done a podcast on IoT yet. And I think a lot of people, when they look at IoT, it's one of those buzzwords that when it first came out, I was like, what? So Internet of Things, right? And when we start to dive into it a little bit, we realize how big it really is, right? It's huge. There's tons of stuff that go into it.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. The first time I actually saw it work, because the buzzword was sort of coined probably around 2017. People first started really talking about IoT. And I actually saw it work for the first time. I was at an SE conference in Morocco with the team, and we had some really good hands-on labs, and one of them was IoT. And we had an Assa Abloy lock on the desk, and we had a Philips light bulb. I'll never forget it. And we had to integrate those systems. Using the Ruckus IoT controller, and of course, we had our APs with little Zigbee and BLE dongles plugged in, and it was really cool. We got first-hand experience on setting up a system using our controller or our IoT gateway, and it was super. You could open up the Assa Abloy lock, and when you opened the lock, the light turned on. So, it was really a rudimentary system at that point, but it sort of took away that feeling that, there was a lot of hype in the industry, a lot of talk about IoT. And, when I first heard about it, I'm sure you had the same feeling. Is this vaporware? Was this something that people are actually going to implement? And, when I saw it and I actually got to configure it, I was like, oh, wow. Immediately, I could sort of see the use cases. Just thinking about hospitality, just as an example. Keyless entry into a room. Opening up the door, lights turning on. I mean, the light bulb sort of flashed on for me, and I was like, oh wow, we have the capability, and it was really exciting. So, that's where I first experienced it. And I know the guys at Ruckus have been doing amazing things with it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, too, because hospitality, hotels is probably, when we think about energy consumption in one building, it's probably the one building on the planet that wastes the most, right? I mean, you get somebody that wakes up in the morning, oh, man, I got to scramble, I got to run out, I'm late. Jump in the shower, grab their stuff, leave. All the lights are on. TV's probably on. Do not disturb sign is on, so nobody's ever going to come in and turn the lights on, right? Or turn the lights off. And, now over time they've introduced motion sensors and things like that to where when, you leave after a certain time of motion, the lights will shut off. Well, this really exponentially increases the ability of what you can do. And it's really kind of interesting to me because when I first started looking into it, I realized that sensors were the big thing. The first sensors I talked about with Jose Martel, and we have sensors that you can install that recognize cigarette smoke or vape smoke or anything like that. So they're installed in schools' bathrooms a lot, right? But the sensors, the IoT sensors that are out there that you're talking about, it's almost like I don't know what the term is I'm looking for, but it would be kind of a sequence of events, right? You walk in, motion's detected, this light turns on, and that's great. I love the idea and the concept of it, but it's also something that we have to look at and realize This doesn't just need to exist within a hotel. You can introduce things like this anywhere and do countless things with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
Matt, I've just, I'm quite fortunate at the moment. I'm expanding my knowledge, as we speak. I'm busy with this, the CWISA, which is, the IoT administrator or system administrator course. And, I realized, how big this is. Looking at CWNP now, I think they've got 3 full certifications just on IoT. So, there's a lot more to it. And, when you look at the digital transformation in terms of, industrial revolution, we now, we at 4.0, in terms of the industrial revolution. And, revision 4 is all to do with cybersecurity, and IoT plays into that. So it's really exciting. And, you mentioned hospitality as a vertical. I just love it. I love the fact, if you think of the world we live in today, with COVID-19 being prevalent, you think of IoT solutions in hospitality. And I just think how cool it is that, using an app on your phone today, you can do an online check-in so you can get assigned your room. So in other words, when you arrive, you sort of, bypass the check-in desk altogether. You use keyless entry into your room, which is great. I absolutely, when I used to travel, when I was down in South Africa, I used to go into a lot of the African countries. They sort of had these really, really old, card reader door locks. I'll never forget, after a full day's work, dragging your laptop bag, up the stairs or the elevator, getting back to the room late and, pushing your card into the reader and the door wouldn't open. And it got so bad, we learned tricks, Matt, that we'd, take the magnetic strip and, wipe it on your shirt 10 times. Put it in quick in and out, so we had different tricks. And the worst thing is, when it didn't work, having to go all the way back down to the reception desk to go and ask for a new card. And then, a number of times the systems would be offline, so they couldn't even register a new card. Then they'd have to send somebody up with you to go and open your room. I mean, it's just a nightmare. If you think of IoT now, keyless entry into your room. Being able to control your lighting in the room, your air conditioned systems. You could actually set up your room today before you even open the door. So, I just think that's great. And, that's just one vertical that we're discussing. There are so many more. And, the more I read and the more I engage with, just the CWISA book that I'm reading, the more you dig into IoT, Jesus, it's a massive realization of how big this is. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, one thing that's kind of interesting that I'm looking forward to seeing if this comes to fruition in light at a larger scale. I know it exists out there today, but when we look at this crazy world we live in now, return to work is going to become a thing. And it's probably, I think a lot of companies are going to look at this and say, all right, look, you're either comfortable with it or you're not, right? So you want to return to the office or you don't. But I think that then becomes, okay, our offices have to become smarter at this point. So how do we do that? Well, you introduce IoT, right? So you introduce all of these sensors that says you walk in, somebody assigns you a desk for the day, you sit down at your desk for the day, that sensor kicks on, your phone, your laptop attached to the Wi-Fi, the heat turns on in that area, the lights turn on in that area, you work throughout the day, you're done, you leave, the sensor recognizes that you left, shuts everything off. So I'd like to see a lot of that stuff come as well. And maybe we will, maybe we won't. I mean, that might be pie in the sky and some cutting edge folks might start to bring that stuff in. But that's kind of where this stuff is going, where you start to automate the human experience that's invisible to the human.
Yeah, Matt, I really like that idea. If you think of the smart office environment, you've just sort of, hit the nail on the head. People want to feel safe. Returning to the office now. I mean, I'm certainly in a fortunate position today where, I sit at home and work from a home office. But, with the UK, the rate that these guys are now, getting jabs into people's arms, they're starting to talk about opening up offices in the next couple of months. And, I'm sure a lot of people are sort of apprehensive about, oh, geez, if I go in, is it going to be safe? And I really love the idea, with IoT, as you've said, being able to control that environment, assigning desk spaces, knowing who's in that environment and knowing, in terms of proximity, how close together they are. So you could quite quickly establish a hotspot area, within an office space where too many people are mixing, as an example. So, you just get a lot more control over that environment.
Yep.
And, just that whole smart office, just thinking of smart buildings, again, you're going to have less people coming in. You typically want to control, your HVAC systems. And, the more I look at schools, I've looked at some of the IoT, offerings for schools. I think it's fantastic. When you think of making the environment safer, using, they're talking about augmented reality, virtual reality, 3D printing, and you just think of safety using, CCTV. Being able to, automate attendance registers, knowing, how many students are at the school. I just think there's so many applications. You mentioned it. Having sensors with actuators, that's what it's all about. And in a school environment, being able to work out, and I saw the video, at our office where we actually tested, picking up the vaping. I saw the video where the guy's sitting there, in proximity of one of the vape sensors. I've been able to control that. I've even seen systems now to prevent bullying. So, if you think of air pollution being one sensor, that we can react to in terms of picking up vapor in the air, what about noise? In a situation where, maybe kids get into a fight, we can establish a sensor in terms of the noise floor. Any raised voices, so any violent activities gets picked up, and you get notified about that. So even in education, I just think it adds so much value.
Yeah. Yep. And the other thing too, looking at now, smart homes are becoming a bigger and bigger thing here in the U.S. I'm not sure about the UK, but we have equipment installed in homes here, and they were built initially as smart homes, and then I don't know if some of that was scaled back or not. But when you start to look at, I mean, I would love to have home automation built within our house, just because you open the door coming in from the garage and X amount of lights turn on, at a certain time at night things turn off. I think you start to see things like that become more and more maybe relevant over time or prevalent. But the problem with that is, in a house with electricity, you start to look at PoE sensors and things like that. If my parents moved into a smart home tomorrow, I would be on 24/7 on call, right? Because something goes wrong, I've got to help them troubleshoot that. Or somebody that's less technical savvy. For us, we can sit here and talk about this stuff all day long, because something goes sideways, you and I can figure it out, right? And get it troubleshot and fixed.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, right. Or make a phone call and be like, help. But that's the reality of it, right? I mean, most typical people aren't going to be able to do that. So it's something that should be a nice add-on that people can add if they want, if they're technically savvy enough to do it. But you don't really want to roll that thing out widespread, especially now. I mean, you said the first time you saw this term come up was in 2017. That's 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Even though technology moves extremely fast, still, even with something like this and the things that we're talking about, there's still a lot of baking that needs to be done with it before it gets ready for a rollout of that magnitude, right? So the places where it exists now, education verticals, hospitality verticals, corporate environments, that makes sense because you have engineers and operations folks that do the care and feeding and management of it. But rolling it out in a home environment, that's a you and I weekend project kind of thing, right?
Yeah, Matt, I've noticed in the UK, look, when I moved over just over a year ago now, we moved into what's considered a new build in the UK. And, you move into a home and, it's already got all the cabled infrastructure. So every floor in the house, has your, your UTP connectors, so everything's cabled up, right down to where your fiber comes in. I mean, you just basically choose a service provider, get your fiber lit up, and, you already have that infrastructure. So I don't think it's too far away. But again, it's huge in terms of educating people. And, as you've made it clear, young guys, that are tech savvy, it's quite simple. I think, we can find our way around most systems. But, of course, the older generation, they absolutely wouldn't have a clue.
Sure.
But another vertical that really interests me, and I think it's fantastic, if you think of smart cities today, where you can now deliver services, to residents, business, people that are visiting a city. I think it's really powerful. So, I've seen applications and implementations where they talk about, smart parking. Imagine arriving into a city or a town and, before you even get into the center, you can go and have a look. So, all right, cool, parking bay C, yeah, there are 10 parkings there. Can you imagine how you can alleviate traffic congestion and frustration in a city where people just know, I come in, cool, I know exactly where I can go and park. I mean, that is brilliant. Security cameras again. What about smart bins? I've seen the guys in Europe implement smart bins, where your bin starts filling up. It gets to a point and it lets the, local municipality know, that they need to go. And they could probably monitor it, on a street level or a suburb. It just helps them really maximize or, make their business more efficient in terms of going out and collecting those bins, managing congestion. What about environmental controls in a city? What about being able to use sensors and actuators to talk about your air quality as an example? Again, smart cities, there's just so much to offer, in terms of, you think about waste management, water management, having geysers in homes that can be controlled, at an IP level. I think it's brilliant. So public health there is a major consideration. Again, safety and just overall minimizing frustration, people moving around, being able to find parking. Again, I think it's a great application for IoT.
Is this going to get to the point to where I walk by a sensor somewhere in public and somebody gets alerted that I'm having a bad day and I need a hug?
Yeah, or maybe someone comes running up with a cup of coffee and a donut and says, "Hey, Mr. Clouder, I see you've had a really bad start to your day, Here you go, here's your coffee."
You're talking my language now.
Matt, and to take that further, I've seen systems, or there's been a lot of talk about it, gunshot detection.
Yep.
Being able to locate, it's obviously based on a sensor picking up sound, at a certain frequency. But imagine being able to pinpoint, where the gun was fired and actually get a location.
Yeah, they exist. I mean, sadly, there's places like Chicago, which I love Chicago. It's a great city. It's amazing. I mean, there's so many great things about it, but they have problems out there. So they have pop cameras in certain areas, and it detects a gunshot, and that camera swivels, and it points right at where that sound was detected from, which is really interesting to me too, because when you look at how the neighborhoods are built, right, the acoustics of it, that becomes a challenge, because if a gunshot is fired over there, it could sound like it came from over there. So that's really intriguing, because when acoustics bounce like that, that sensor has to be pretty dialed in. So it's kind of an interesting thing to look at when you say, hey, that camera's going to swivel, and it still has a pretty wide range of view, but I mean, you could swivel that thing in the wrong direction depending on the acoustics. I don't know how you would test that to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, and you think of that in terms of, sound waves propagate pretty much the same as Wi-Fi does, right?
Yeah.
As wireless communication. So, it's going to scatter and it's going to reflect and, do all the things that a wave does. So, I mean, I would hate to be the guy that's actually got to go out and plan that network and, I suppose you've got to test and, continue testing until you know that it's a reliable system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sound engineers are no different than experts in Wi-Fi like yourself. I mean, you understand how that signal, I guess we'll call it, is working and how it works when it bounces off of things. So I'm sure they probably sit down and look at it with a pretty tuned eye and ear to make sure that it's being built correctly. So, hey, one thing I wanted to ask you about too, because in the next few weeks, probably the live streams are going to kick back up, I think, in March.
Yeah.
And when we start to do that, we're going to start to look at doing some different things with that. And one of the main things we want to look at is best practices, right?
Okay.
You can go out and build a network to your heart's content, but if you're not at least applying some of the best practices, whether they be industry best practices, Ruckus design best practices, or internal operations teams best practices, you're kind of heading down kind of a sketchy path, right? You're going to have problems that you shouldn't have. So when we look at how networks build and organically grow over time, we have to really take into consideration, what does the base of it look like? We can keep stacking things on top of it all day long, but if the core underlying pieces aren't really there and intact, then the pieces you stack on top of it are going to start to fall off. So how do you what are some things that people should really be targeting in terms of best practices at the base network layer before they start to tack things on like IoT?
Matt, look, again, education, the CW DP that I went through as part of my certifications, in terms of wireless communication, it's all about, sound design principles. And I think people often miss it, when you think about designing these networks, it's all about, having a sit down, with all the parties at stake. You've got to sit down with a customer, you've got to sit down with the right people in that organization, right, and tap into all of them and get a clear understanding, of what it is, what their expectation is. Before you just dive in and go and, do a predictive coverage model of where you're going to place APs, you need to understand the services that they wanted to support, the infrastructure to support those services. But, I found in my personal experience, quite frequently we tend to sit down with the wrong individuals within an organization to get an understanding, a firm grasp of what their needs are. As part of a best practice guide, to me, that's sort of step one. Whenever you think of building or designing these systems, well, get the right stakeholders around the table. If you think of logistics or warehousing, we often land up in a boardroom talking to the CTO of a company, the chief technical engineer. What about talking to the guy that actually drives the forklift around the warehouse with an old antiquated, 802.11 prime sort of handheld scanner that knows nothing about the new standards? However, that functionality is crucial to that person's everyday job.
Yeah.
So quite often we don't get the right input. We don't get the right people around the table. And, I've noticed even with my training now, when I talk about Smart Zone, the controller, just about every module we go through, we start off a module in terms of teaching about considerations. And I like it because those considerations, you think about building a WLAN, what are the considerations? Those are the questions that you should be asking. Sitting around the table with the right folk, asking the right questions. So best practice design guides, sure, and I really would like to expand on this topic. We always get, I remember as an SE, we always used to get lambasted when it was, can we support voice over Wi-Fi as an example? And can we do a good job of it? With these iOS devices that are so sticky, they hang on to one AP radio for dear life before they move. Yep. How do we go about designing those networks the correct way? And again, if we're not asking the right questions up front, and one of the real questions is, well, what is the mix of client devices that we want to support on that network? If the guys are saying, yeah, well, a lot of our people are using sort of fourth gen, iPads, or older devices, you need to really start understanding what that mix is, what services they want on the network infrastructure, sure, but what those stations or what those client device capabilities are. So there are a number of questions, Matt, and to unpack best practice design guides, I would absolutely love it. We can talk about voice over Wi-Fi. We can talk about roaming capabilities. Design for hospitality is a great subject to cover off. The argument around, do we deploy APs, down the hallways or the passageways on floors, or do we actually deploy them, within hotel rooms? And today, large public venues, oh my God, the thought process that goes into designing for a large public venue is huge. And, I'm up for it. If you want to expand on these, discussions, absolutely. Between myself and Brian Hawkins, I'm sure we can put up some, we can have some really, really in-depth, good conversation about those topics. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny too. I can always tell it's fun talking to you because having that SE background, you have this knack for understanding your audience, right? You can walk into a customer site and you're going to meet with a CTO for 30 minutes. Okay, that's great. That's going to get you their vision for the next 3 to 5 years of what they want to do with their network. Yeah. Now, go sit down and talk to an engineer and say, okay, I know what your vision is for 5 years. What do you need now? And what do you need to be ready for the next 3 to 5 years? And you get that information. And I'll give you a perfect example, right? I've got a friend of mine that's in the industry, and we talk about this stuff all the time. And we're sitting around just chit-chatting one night, and he's like, so get this. We have this team that comes to us and says, hey, we've got a problem. We have to add a bunch of bandwidth because our backups are taking forever. And this is a replication backup from data center to data center. And they're like, okay, let's take a look at it. And they take a look at it, and what do they discover? They're firing their backups off at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow. That's
okay.
That's not good.
So basically what you're telling me is something is taking 10 hours when if you fire it at midnight and automate it, it'll take like 3. Sure enough, they flipped it over. And see, if you would have gone in and had a conversation with somebody that was the wrong audience, you get the wrong information. So you start to architect and build a solution around that when you don't have all the facts, right? I mean, you're still kind of a detective with some of this stuff at the same time, where you have to figure out what's really going on here. What are we trying to solve?
Correct.
And what can you solve yourself? You already have an infrastructure that's built. Are you using it correctly? Are you using it at the right times? Are you maximizing what you can use it for? And there's so many factors that go into it. But the best practice stuff, I want to get you and Brian together and start to dig into some of that stuff, because that's where...
Yeah, with pleasure.
Yeah, that's the big brain stuff there. That's where you start to look at things and go, oh boy, here we go. You know what I mean?
And Matt, going back to that discussion around just, when you engage with a customer, you think, what is their existing infrastructure? What are the capabilities there? So, I've seen engineers go in and, hey, put in some, do some packet sniffing, put in some sensors, build a logical network diagram to get an understanding of what they have. If you think of a smart zone, I mean, you could turn on things like application recognition and control, and very quickly establish exactly what applications they're using on that network.
Yep.
You might find that 40% of your staff are sitting there all day on, Facebook or Twitter instead of doing their work. And, at that point, you could then go in and say, well, hey, now that we understand the network, we know what its capability is, we know what people are using, let's start, fine-tuning, building filters, making sure that things like that are not happening during office hours. So it's really interesting. But Matt, hey, just on this IoT thing, when I started looking at it, what I found really amusing is I went and try to dig out definitions of what different organizations, their main statement or definition when it comes to what IoT is. And I looked at the ITU, so the International Telecommunications Union, and I quote, their statement is, IoT is a global infrastructure for the information society, enabling advanced services by interconnecting physical and virtual things based on existing and involving interoperable information and communication technologies. right? So that's quite a broad statement. It's a little bit fluffy, right? I looked at the IEEE, right, the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and this one I really appreciate. So its statement was clear, right? An IoT is a network that connects uniquely identifiable things to the internet. The things have sensing, actuation, and potential programmability capabilities. And through the exploitation of unique identification and sensing, information about the thing can be collected, and the state of the thing can be changed from anywhere, anytime, by anything. I found that statement to really, really sum up exactly what IoT represents. I thought it was quite cool.
It is, yeah. And it's funny, too, because in all the experience that we have on the years and years and years of doing this, I never in a million years thought you could read something from IEEE where they would describe the technology or the feature or the function as a thing. That's the crazy part, is we're now describing things, right?
It's things. And the dictionary, I saw the Merriam-Webster dictionary in the USA, that apparently is your guys' sort of online trusted dictionary. IoT is actually a word in that dictionary. So it just shows sort of how widespread and recognized IoT has become.
I thought that dictionary is based off of Oxford, though, right? Because I think
so. I
don't know. I'm not going to quote
anything. I came across it in the CWISA, and I was like, oh, well, that sounds cool. I haven't really heard of it, but I'm not from the States. But when they've got that word in the dictionary as a term, they've got a weird description though.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny too because I have Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, they've got a term, that it says IoT is a term that is expected to be used for a long time, and they say something that is promising to make all kinds of tedious tasks go down more smoothly with information being sent to and from household objects and devices. It's so funny. Say your bedroom fan, toaster, and oven using the internet. I had to laugh at that one. I thought it was hysterical.
And that you're going to trigger me because I still don't understand why my refrigerator needs to have a Wi-Fi adapter in it. I'm probably the biggest offender I know. I understand why, but seriously, my refrigerator does not need an IP address. And what I did at home is I kind of abused the IoT term a little bit because I created an IoT VLAN. I have it completely firewalled off, so it lives in a DMZ. And anything that is a managed device by somebody else, so for example, my security system, Alexa, anything like my TVs, anything that connects to the internet that is a manufactured device lives in that VLAN because it's completely firewalled off from everything else. So I can run.
Good job.
Yeah, I can run MDNS to get everything. Like if I have a TV that's connected to the IoT VLAN, but I have a Plex server that's running on my internal network, MDNS it, done. It'll actually work, and I can punch a hole in the firewall for that MDNS piece to work. But if it's a camera or something else that somebody can get into or do something with, and they have access to that network at that point, sorry, you got access to the camera. That's it. You can't touch anything else.
Jeez, Matt, that's really smart. I like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, you do this long enough,
sensible.
You realize that there's bad actors everywhere, and somebody's going to have the wrong idea about what they should be doing with things, and you're exposing this stuff no matter what. It's still very difficult to get into that stuff, but it's also managed by somebody in an operations center that I don't know what their intentions are. You know what I mean? Like, you connect to my doorbell camera. What's that?
They can't all be good intentions.
Oh, yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah. You remember that application, Mobile Iron?
Yeah.
Mobile
Iron.
Yeah, it's it
yeah.
manages your mobile device. There was a state somewhere that they looked at it and reviewed it because they were going to put it on all the state employees' phones. And after they reviewed, they went, no way. Said somebody is going to become a grudged employee, and they're going to wipe everybody's phones, and then we're going to get hit with a lawsuit. So no.
Yeah, that's a really, really good example of where things could go bad. Matt, another thing I was thinking about, you talk about this connected world we live in. I mean, I don't know, my Alexa actually scares me. And sometimes I'll be having a conversation with my wife or son, and I promise you, not one of us says the word Alexa, and she'll just chime in and start talking about something, and I'll go, right, Alexa, stop. I didn't talk to you, but I don't know if you've noticed, and I don't know, it's almost as though people are listening to you. The other day, prime example of Alexa, I call my son on his phone. We're in a 3-story house. He's at the top. I was a bit lazy. I wanted to call him down to get something to eat. So I called him from Alexa. And the phone rang very briefly, and all of a sudden I heard a lady talking. She was having a conversation. And I said, "Hi, ma'am. Sorry, we must have a crossed line, or something weird is going on." And she couldn't hear me. And the weirdest thing is, I could hear her side of the conversation, but I could never hear the other person respond.
That's eerie.
So somehow, I picked up somebody's conversation. Although it was only one side of the conversation, I mean, I could hear her clearly. I couldn't communicate with her. I found that like really eerie, really scary.
Yeah. Ugh.
And it's all tied into Amazon. And what also worries me is sometimes, you might ask Alexa a question, and then you might log into one of your social media platforms, and all of a sudden you start seeing a lot of advertising coming in, based on the question that you asked Alexa.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think the reality is that people are listening to us, and we just got to be a lot smarter and just be careful with this great technology we have.
Yep, I read something that smart devices that, like Alexa and Apple's Siri, I'm going to say Siri, and she's going to turn on, but well, she won't now or she usually does when I don't want her to, like you said. But they said on average they listen to you about roughly 30 times a day. And
oh wow,
I never in my entire life would have ever purchased an Echo Dot ever. But my wife wanted one, so she bought one and set it up, and it's on her account. She uses it a lot. I mean, in terms of managing household stuff, reminders, lists, things like that, it does great. But who knows what kind of data that thing has? I mean, it's a little scary. You're right. So, but hey, it's a world we live in, and I think
that's it.
As a collective society, kind of gave up on privacy a long time ago with certain things, because if you don't know, you don't know, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
It's your choice at the end of the day, what you want to know.
Yeah.
And it's connected, and it's getting more and more connected daily.
Yep.
We just had a new washing machine delivered today. I said to my wife, I must check the manual and see if it's got an IP address. Maybe we can load it up with laundry and detergent and, turn it on at a specific time of the night, or set the program, from a mobile app. Who knows?
Yep.
It's probably coming.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Hey, Trevor, I hate to do this. I actually have to boogie.
Yeah. Cool.
Next couple of weeks, let's me and Brian Harkins get together and go through the best practice stuff too, because that's going to become a pretty large discussion in terms of, podcast stuff and live stream stuff. So I think that's a great lead into that. So let's get together and do that for sure.
Excellent, Matt. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, hey, as always, it was great talking to you.
Yeah.
And
well, Matt, you have a super rest of your day. I'm headed into the afternoon. I know you're still early morning there. But again, thanks for your time, and I really enjoy these chats. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really is. So thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Cool, man. Anytime, Matt. Stay well. Look after yourself.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
All right. Cheers now.
Thanks. See you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Ruckcast. If you just found us for the first time, be sure to follow or subscribe on your platform of choice so you can be notified of future episodes. If you have ideas for future episodes or can't find Ruckcast on your favorite platform, contact us at ruckcast@comscope.com. And as always, thanks for listening.